I just watched the Cultural Revolution scene in Three Body Problem on Netflix. The scene is praised by a lot of people, but at the same time is hated by Chinese nationalists and little pinks. And there's no surprise the show is banned in China because of this scene. So how accurate is the scene compared to real history? Well, I grew up in communist China and my family lived through the Cultural Revolution. So in this video, I'm going to give an in-depth analysis of the scene and let's see which part did it right and which part was not so accurate. Welcome to my channel. My name is Ali. If you like my content, please help me by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Now, first of all, for those of you who are not familiar with Three Body Problem, let me first give you a brief introduction and explain why is there a Cultural Revolution scene in it. So Three Body Problem by Netflix is an adaptation of a Chinese sci-fi novel of the same name. It was written by Liu Cixin in 2006, and since then it has become one of the most popular sci-fi novels from China. On the back of the book it says, 1967, Ye Wenjie, who is one of the most crucial characters of this novel, witnesses Red Guards beat her father to death during China's Cultural Revolution. This singular event will shape not only the rest of her life, but also the future of mankind. So what happened during the Cultural Revolution actually played a pivotal role in the story. But what you might not know is that even though the book was written 30 years after the Cultural Revolution has ended, both the author and the publisher still had to apply self-censorship to avoid getting in trouble with the CCP. The Cultural Revolution scene was moved around multiple times as a result. When the story was originally serialized in 2006, the author Liu Cixin began telling the story with the Cultural Revolution scene as the opening. That makes the most sense because it set the tone for the rest of the story. But when it was published as a standalone book 2 years later in 2008, all the chapters involving the Cultural Revolution was moved and hidden deep into the book to avoid attracting the attention of CCP censors. Then 4 years later, when the book was being translated into English for the Western market, they don't have to worry about censorship anymore, so the translators rearranged the Cultural Revolution chapters back to the beginning where it was originally intended to be by the author. The translators also added a passage to the beginning of the book that wrote, "Over 40 days in Beijing alone, more than 1,700 victims of struggle sessions were beaten to death, and many others picked an easier path to avoid the madness." By an easier path, they meant saying goodbye to this world forever. In fact, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm going to explain the details later. But first, let's take a look at the Netflix scene together. First thing we see is words on screen that says, Beijing Tsinghua University, 1966. The Cultural Revolution was formally launched on May 16, 1966. In the beginning, Mao mobilized the Red Guards to lead the movement. And who are the Red Guards? They're basically middle school, high school, and college students who were fanatically loyal to Mao and his agendas. The first students who called themselves Red Guards were from the Tsinghua University's middle school, and they soon spread to all other schools. On August 1st, 1966, Mao wrote a letter to the Red Guards at Tsinghua University, not the middle school anymore, the university itself, to give them approval and support. The Red Guards were then free to do things without any restrictions. So this scene is set right in the center of where it all began. The book everyone's holding is called Quotations from Chairman Mao. It's actually nicknamed Red Precious Book in China, but in the West we just call it Little Red Book because of the size. Now, during the Cultural Revolution, everyone have at least one copy on them carrying at all times, and everyone memorized the content by heart. You have to recite a few sentences before doing anything. And people will get into deep trouble and end up on the stage if they accidentally damage the book in any way. The stage also looks pretty accurate. At that time, every school will have their own struggle session stage, so each stage will look different. But they will definitely have Mao's quotes everywhere, and sometimes they will hang Mao's photo right in the center. I think the director and the art team used this historical photo as a reference and replicated it. The photo shows people sitting in the back with tables and chairs, a giant wall of mouse quote. They even use the same microphones. Next, we see this poor guy being forced on stage. This is mostly accurate as well. The funny-looking cone-shaped hat that he's wearing is a typical way to humiliate the victim. It usually has their accusation and name written on it. He also has a board hanging over his neck, and that also has the accusation and name on it. The black things on his shirt, they're ink marks. They're usually poured on their faces to humiliate them further, as you can see in this photo. I think the director chose to keep the actor's face clean so we can see his expressions better. The victims were also forced to bow or kneel to the crowd. And some other ways of humiliation include cutting their hair messily and parading them through the streets. Then the father came on stage, and the female Red Guard shouted, 造反有理,革命无罪, rebellion is just, revolution is righteous. This is also accurate. The phrase was shouted by the Red Guards every day. It was even printed on posters. On this shot, we see a few people standing on the roof of the buildings. This is also accurate. It's very typical for Chinese people to stand on high grounds to join struggle sessions like this. And in the crowd, we see a banner that says, Chairman Mao is the red sun in our hearts. It's a very typical phrase during that time. It was also turned into a song. I like these little touches the filmmakers added in there. It made the scene seem more realistic. And then the male Red Guard was questioning the father, and it turns out he's one of the father's students. This is very accurate. In the beginning of the Cultural Revolution, the Red Guards targeted their own school's principals and teachers because Mao gave specific order to get rid of them from the schools. In fact, the intellectuals were always the target of various CCP movements, not only in the Cultural Revolution. And the reason is, intellectuals, especially the teachers, they're the ones still holding on to traditional Chinese culture. Unfortunately, traditional Chinese culture and the CCP cannot coexist. Because the CCP is against everything traditional Chinese culture values, such as morality, spirituality, compassion, the 5 cardinal virtues, etc., etc. Therefore, the CCP has to eliminate it from people's mind, so the teachers ended up being the first targets. For example, in Ningxia University, between June and July in 1966, 83% of the teachers were verbally attacked and 42% were physically attacked. And in the medical college, out of 674 total professors, more than 500 were persecuted. In the CCP's official report compiled after the Cultural Revolution, a total of 142,000 educators became victims among 17 provinces. And keep in mind, this is a report by the CCP, so the actual number could be much larger. Next, the female Red Guard attacked Einstein. This is accurate. Not only the Chinese intellectuals were attacked, Westerners who were not in line with communist ideology were also attacked, and that include Newton and Einstein. Then they brought out the wife. This is very accurate. Family members were always forced to join the struggle sessions, and sometimes they're even forced to join in on the beatings. On August 25, 1966, a 7th grade student was forced to hit the school principal with a stick. The school principal was his father, and after his father was beaten to death, the son went crazy. Most of the time, though, the family members will be too scared to receive the same treatment, so they will be willingly renounce the relationship with the victim. Some people will even actively attack each other to survive, such as the wife here. A lot of times, the brainwashed children became the first to snitch on their parents. For example, a female teacher in the Beijing elementary school became a struggle session victim. Her daughter, after severed ties with the mother, will criticize the mom's new movements whenever there's a chance. The destruction of family is not just a byproduct of the Cultural Revolution. It was always one of the CCP's goals. The Communist Manifesto clearly promotes the abolition of families because it makes the individuals easier to control when there's no trust among each other, not even among family members. And then the wife's accusation about the husband being open to the idea of the existence of God is accurate, because communism practices atheism. So anyone who believes in or worships any religion, people, entity, or even a theory means the person does not love Mao and the CCP 100%, and is therefore a counter-revolutionary. It's a big crime during the Cultural Revolution. The beating here is portrayed accurately. First, they were using belts. The Red Guards all wore army clothes with belts on the outside, and their belts all have copper buckles. It's their standard weapon during this time. Secondly, it's a group attack. The Red Guards always move in numbers, and all the victims that were beaten to death were attacked by a group, so none of the attackers would take responsibility. When the father stopped moving, the main attacker paused and showed fear in her eyes. This wouldn't happen at all. The main attacker, she's leading the struggle session. That means she firmly believes in the righteousness of her actions. She regards Mao as a savior and a god. And Mao said, the bad deserved it if they were beaten by the good. She'll never question if she's doing the right thing because that means she's questioning Mao as well. Also, during that time, there was a popular saying among Beijing Red Guards. Beating someone to death is just a matter of 28 yuan. At that time, it cost 28 yuan to cremate a body, and the victim's family has to pay for it. So these students, especially the leader, they didn't care about killing someone at all. On top of that, in a public attack like this, the attackers were often using this chance to demonstrate how devoted and how loyal each of them were towards Mao's teachings. And they often competed with each other on how hard they would hit someone. So no one in this case would actually stop and show any fear or remorse, because that means others could accuse him for not being loyal enough. And then not only the people on stage paused, the crowd also stopped chanting and seemed shocked by what happened. I understand what the director is trying to do here. He probably wanted to show that the Red Guards were also people, they also had some humanity in them. But the reality is, no one would bat an eye at someone dying, because it is a much expected outcome at these struggle sessions. On the contrary, it will probably excite the crowd more, and their cheerings will probably get louder. And then they show the wife crying on stage. This is also not going to happen. The wife came out to attack the husband in order to cut ties with him, so she can't show any pity on the enemy of the revolution. Otherwise, she'll be grouped together with the husband again. The families, they have to hide their true emotions no matter what they were thinking. And here's an example. A daughter of a victim during the Cultural Revolution recalled that when she first heard the news of her mother's death, she had to hold in the tears because her father had told her that they could not cry in front of others, otherwise they had no way to renounce their relationship with her mother. And even after they get home, they had to cry secretly without making any sound, fearing that the neighbors could hear them. When the struggle session ended, the body was left on stage. This is not accurate either. Normally, the body would be taken away, and there's no way they would allow the family member to mourn the dead openly on stage. In some instances, after killing the principal or teacher, the Red Guards would even force other teachers to continue hitting the dead bodies. And those who refused, they were told that they would suffer the same fate. And this happened in at least 3 middle schools in Beijing. This is the end of the scene. But at that time, people didn't know. This is just the start of the Cultural Revolution. The movement would last 10 years from 1966 to 1976. And the killings only got more severe as they spread to the entire society. I mentioned earlier that on August 1st, 1966, Mao gave support to Tsinghua University's Red Guards, and that ignited the month-long massacre known as the Red August. Remember the passage that was included in the beginning of the English translation of this book? It was from an official CCP's report that says, between August and September of 1966, 1,772 people were beaten to death by the Red Guards. 85,196 families were expelled from Beijing forcibly. My family was one of these families, so was the book author's family. The author Liu Cixin was born in 1963, and his family was expelled in 1966 when he was 3 years old. Later that month, on August 18th, 1966, a rally with more than 800,000 Red Guards was held in Tiananmen Square. Mao waved to them and personally greeted the leader of a Red Guard division that killed the deputy principal of their school. She and the other Red Guards at the school beat the deputy principal with a wooden stick spiked with nails and then burned her with boiling water. They were the first to kill among all schools in this movement. After this meeting, the morale of the Red Guards were significantly boosted because Chairman Mao personally supported them for killing, so no one dared to stop them now. And that triggered their massive slaughter in Beijing. Using Daxing County near Beijing as an example, from August 27th to September 1st, 1966, in only 6 days, a total of 325 people were killed, and among which the oldest was 80 years old and the youngest was only 38 days old. In the beginning of the Cultural Revolution, the struggle sessions were mostly happening in schools, but Mao was not satisfied with this result. On August 31st, 1966, Mao said, the movement need to expand from schools to the society. As you can imagine, the number of victims grew exponentially. In 1968, 350,000 people were killed in Inner Mongolia province alone. And according to conservative tallies, the number of unnatural deaths in China during the Cultural Revolution is 7.73 million. Other than Mao himself, no one was safe during the Cultural Revolution, and the Red Guards were no exception. After being Mao's favorite pet for 2 years, the Red Guards themselves ended up being the next target. The Red Guards were being used by the CCP and Mao to carry out their agenda and to start the Cultural Revolution, and then they were abandoned. Many were labeled counter-revolutionaries and imprisoned, and others were sent to the countryside to labor and reform their thoughts. So now you understand why the CCP tried so hard to erase the existence of the Cultural Revolution. When I was in school, my teacher spent about 2 minutes teaching the class about the Cultural Revolution. And she said, Chairman Mao was just getting old and he just made a mistake. But everybody makes mistakes. We shouldn't judge a great leader who did so much great things for China by this one single mistake. Now, everyone, turn to the next page. That's all. That's all she said about Cultural Revolution. We learned more about slavery in America than we did on our own history. If my family didn't tell me about some stories, I wouldn't have learned anything about the Cultural Revolution at all and believed what the teacher said. The younger generation in China today, most of them haven't even heard of the term Cultural Revolution before. They refuse to believe it exists. And that's why they hated the Netflix version of Three-Body Problem and blamed the US for making China look bad. In 2023, China broadcasted their own version of Three-Body Problem. It's a TV series with 30 episodes. But guess what? The Cultural Revolution scene was completely deleted. Not only that, all the plot lines that's related to the Cultural Revolution were minimized and reduced to vague dialogues. But this created huge plot holes in the story, and people couldn't understand why Ye Wenjie did what she did. But a netizen wrote, after watching the first 10 seconds of the Netflix version, the answer came out. It all makes sense now. I think the scene for the most part is very accurate. So kudos to the team for their courage and their effort for bringing the scene alive, to remind us of this brutal history and to show us the true nature of the CCP. That's all for today. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for watching all the way to the end. My name is Ali, and I'll see you next time.